Yes, I know I'm in the same clothes. I'm back for another video. Did all the video recording in one sitting. If you missed the video where we covered the entire AFC free agency and draft editions and who to expect and project to be the starters and the guys we should be drafting in fantasy, go check out that video. I'm going to put it somewhere. I don't know where, but you'll find it somewhere. I'll put it somewhere up here so you guys can check that out before we cover the NFC. So NFC, Fantasy 2025 NFL projections. Let's roll the intro. Now let's move on and talk NFC East. We'll start with the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. This one's a quick one. There's no real additions to talk about in this offense. They have Saquon Barkley, top 3 running back. They have A.J. Brown. He's kind of hard to rank in my opinion. I would probably have him somewhere outside of the top 10, but you could definitely make that argument. He's 9, he's 10. Davonte Smith is obviously a stud in his own right. I would feel much better about drafting him over A.J. Brown, but that's just my personal opinion. And Jalen Hurts is an elite fantasy quarterback, so that pretty much sums up everything for the Philadelphia Eagles. Let's talk Washington Commanders now, who, despite De'Ami Brown leaving, add Deebo Samuel, which is an upgrade. It was a quiet offseason for them, but it should be another strong season for Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin in that offense. Brian Robinson Jr. is an absolute dog in my opinion, but he is yet to consistently finish in that RB2 territory, so we'll see if this is the year where he finally breaks through. You may even get one more season out of Zach Ertz for fantasy, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. Let's talk New York Giants, who, even though they drafted a quarterback, no matter who they put at quarterback, it's going to be significantly better QB play than what Malik Nabers had in 2024, making Malik Nabers a must-have first-round pick, probably right outside of the top 5, arguably a top 5 wide receiver. This guy's going to kill the entire league if he's healthy, I'm telling you. He is amazing. I was very high on him last year. I'm still very high on Malik Nabers. You got to go draft him with your first-round pick. If you're in the middle of the first round, you're in the back of the first round, go get that. One could assume that if Tyrone Tracy is in an offense that crosses midfield and actually scores touchdowns, doesn't punt and kick field goals all the time, this should be a good season for Tyrone Tracy as well in 2025. So there's some exciting pieces in the Giants offense to look forward to. Now let's talk the Dallas Cowboys. Arguably and could potentially be the worst team in the NFC East this year. But let's talk about they added Javonte Williams despite letting Rico Dowdle walk. And they added George Pickens via trade. I don't know how much fantasy impact that's going to have, but there's no doubt CeeDee Lamb is one of the best wide receivers in fantasy. So you obviously have to be drafting him in the first round. And at this point, I feel like Dak, as much as I think he is a good quarterback, is a matchup-dependent quarterback at best in 2025. I don't think he's going to be able to be a weekly starter. You always know for a fact there's those games where the Cowboys melt down, and that means Dak's not going to have a good game. But in certain matchups, you can start him, and he is going to dominate. Let's talk NFC South. We'll start with the Atlanta Falcons. No real major additions. We're going to see a full 17 games of Michael Penix Jr., though, so that's exciting. Not going to run to the draft board to draft him just yet, but something to monitor at least. Drake London should be locked in for a wide receiver 1 season, and Bijan Robinson is one of the best running backs in fantasy, so you definitely know you're drafting those guys, and maybe it's the year for Kyle Pitts, but I'm not going to be the one to find out. Now let's talk the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Bucs drafted Emeka Egbuka, who I don't have much expectations for in 2025. I do think he's a really good player, but unless there's an injury to Mike Evans or Chris Godwin, I don't see much of an opportunity or fantasy impact for Emeka Egbuka. Can't forget Baker Mayfield, who middle-of-the-pack QB, probably not going to be a top 5 quarterback, but definitely not going to be worse than the 7th, 8th best guy. Now let's move on to the Carolina Panthers, who added Tech McMillan in the draft. I'm not really too sure how to evaluate that. I'm a little bit of a Tech McMillan skeptic myself, but this should definitely improve their offense and help Bryce Young develop and become a better quarterback in the NFL. They have Chuba Hubbard, and they also signed Rico Dowdle as a handcuff option and insurance policy. So if you're someone who's going to draft Chuba Hubbard or wants to draft Chuba Hubbard, make sure you go get your backup as well. It's unlikely we see Jonathan Brooks at all in 2025, so it's best to assume it's Hubbard and Dowdle moving forward. Let's talk New Orleans Saints, even though I don't want to talk New Orleans Saints. They obviously have Chris Olave. I will never draft him unless they have a quarterback. They have Derek Carr, who's injured, and Tyler Shaw as their quarterback. I would consider that probably some of the worst quarterback room or quarterbacks in the NFL on a team. And you have Alvin Kamara, who's still pretty good, but it's likely his numbers dip down a little bit. I would say it's more likely he puts out those consistent RB2 numbers versus it felt like every week he was putting up RB1 numbers. And that's going to wrap it up for the NFC South. Let's take it to the NFC North now. I got to be honest, I really don't know what to make of the Detroit Lions with their OC and defensive coordinator leaving. Amon-Ra St. Brown should be a wide receiver 1. But I don't think a top 5 wide receiver is really in the range of outcomes for him this year. I think with his safe floor, he's probably not going to hit that. So I would expect him to finish more around like 6 or 7. I think Jared Goff maybe won't have as good of a season as last year, but can be a starting quarterback for you. Maybe more of a matchup dependent guy like Dak. And then obviously Jahmyr Gibbs, not much needs to be said about that. A top 2, top 3 running back, whatever you want to call it. And briefly, just to talk about Jameson Williams, I think we've officially seen the ceiling of Jameson Williams. I think it's boom or bust, flex play wide receiver, and I don't think it gets that much better for him in the future, but maybe you could take a chance on him. Sam Laporta is obviously going to be a starting tight end, should be much better than 2024. And now let's move on to the Minnesota Vikings. Like the Lions, another team that's keeping their player core together at the very least. They add Jordan Mason, which is a good insurance handcuff to Aaron Jones, who they just extended. Justin Jefferson, obviously, top 2 wide receiver in fantasy. There should be no concerns whatsoever. Jordan Addison is a baller in his own right. And don't sleep on what 17 games of TJ Hawkinson could be. Is that a top 5 tight end? I think it could be. Moving on, let's talk Green Bay Packers. They added Matthew Golden in the draft, which is a big acquisition after they went out and made a big splash the year before in getting Josh Jacobs, who should have another strong season in 2025. Going back to the wide receiver room in Matthew Golden, Jaden Reed is still probably the best wide receiver there, but I wouldn't be surprised if Matthew Golden made an fantasy impact right away in 2025. And now finally, the Chicago Bears. I love Colson Loveland. I just got to say it now. I love Colson Loveland. If Shane Waldron leaving the Bears doesn't mean anything to anyone, I believe Rome Odunze, off that alone, should have an explosion year 2, just like JSN had with the Seattle Seahawks after Shane Waldron left. The wide receiver room for the Chicago Bears is DJ Moore and Rome Odunze. They did also add Luther Burden in the draft, who is an interesting prospect, but hard to assume that there's going to be much fantasy output for him, just like it was hard to project anything for Rome Odunze right away last year. DeAndre Swift, it really doesn't excite me all that much. Now let's finally move on to the NFC West, the last division we have to cover of the offseason. Let's talk LA Rams. The LA Rams added Davonte Adams. They let go of Cooper Kupp, and now the wide receiver duo is Puka Nacua and Davonte Adams. That should be a problem for fantasy. If you see you're playing against one of those guys, you should be very much concerned. Kyron Williams will continue to be the starter, continue to be a really good fantasy running back, but if the fumbling continues in 2025, look for Blake Corum to take a little bit of that role away from him. Not saying you're going to be able to start Corum, but definitely grab your handcuff if you're taking Kyron Williams. Now let's talk San Francisco 49ers. The Niners replaced Deebo Samuel with Jordan Watkins, who's probably not going to play all that much because they have Ricky Pearsall that they drafted last year. If Ayuk is healthy, the pecking order for receptions will be Ayuk, Kittle, Pearsall, and CMC. Maybe those last 2 will switch. Christian McCaffrey, if healthy, is an amazing running back, but we just never know if he's healthy, so I can't tell you he's an amazing running back. And George Kittle should be the elite tight end. He always is. Let's talk Arizona Cardinals. Not too many changes here. I expect a big year 2 jump from Marvin Harrison Jr. Obviously, you got to make a jump being that bad, but this is a player that still was figuring it out last year in the NFL. It's not the best team either to be on. So let's give him a little forget the past of his rookie season, and let's see if year 2 can change things. Trey McBride is an elite tight end. Kyler Murray is a quarterback that I probably can't get behind, but if Marv was to have a good season, then That would mean he's a starting quarterback as well. And these are the final years of James Conner, so enjoy it while it's here. And finally, the Seattle Seahawks. This one's kind of a head scratcher, I'm not going to lie. I did not save the best for last. But here we go. Sam Darnold is the quarterback now. JSN, Cooper Kupp, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, that's the wide receiver trio. Don't really feel much confident about anybody after JSN. Ken Walker and Sharps are both great running backs. The thing is, one guy gets all the carries pretty much. If Ken Walker's hurt, Charbonnet's a beast. If Ken Walker's healthy, Ken Walker's a beast. And after Ken or Charbonnet, whoever's playing running back in JSN, I find it very hard to find anybody fantasy starting worthy in 2025. Probably not even Darnold. And that's going to wrap it up for our NFC edition of the free agency off-season acquisitions and projecting 2025 fantasy for these teams. If you didn't watch the AFC off-season video, I'll put that up here somewhere so you can watch that. Thank you again so much for watching. My name is Turtle. This is Outlier Fantasy, and I will see you in the next video.